And what do you think, Elsa? Should we get started?
Yeah, we can go ahead and get started.
Great. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to our Coping in Quarantine webinar with Elsa Rojas, brought to you by Blossom Birth and Family. If you don't know about us, we are a community nonprofit based in Palo Alto, California. We've been around for 20 years. We have a mission to connect new and expectant families with services, resources, and support for a healthy, informed, and confident pregnancy and parenting journey. We have classes every day, from prenatal yoga to family yoga, childbirth classes, and professional development for professionals and more. And since shelter in place, we've been able to move a lot of our classes online. So we can keep continuing to support our community. And we're just starting to have some more free services like Elsa's webinar today, and we're so thankful to have her here. And thanks to donations from the community, we're able to have more programming like this. So it's really exciting, and I'm really excited to have her here to share some much needed strategies for coping during this time. So I'm just going to go over a little bit of housekeeping now. I know that we have talked about it a bit at the beginning, but all of the participants will be muted for the entire session. I will disable the chat once the presentation gets started. If you have a question, you can ask it, you can type it into the Q&A. You have the option to make yourself anonymous, especially since this is getting recorded. If you don't want your name to pop up, then you won't see your name because it's anonymous. At the end of the presentation, Elsa will be answering those questions, as well as if you want to ask a question with your voice, perhaps it is more detailed, or you just feel like you express yourself better when you speak, you can click the raise hand button and we can unmute you after the presentation for that Q&A portion. Like I mentioned, the session is being recorded, so if you are having some connectivity issues or if you have to pop off, I understand, we're all sheltering in place, things happen. There might be somebody running around in the background, or you have to attend to something, so that's totally fine. We'll send you the recording of this presentation. If we get Zoom bombed, then we'll conclude the session and either reschedule it or send the recording to everybody. And I think that's it. So thank you all for being here, and thank you, Elsa. And I'm going to hand it off to you.
All right, thank you, Allison. So welcome to everybody who's here. I'm really happy to have you all here, and really, really hope that today feels valuable and useful for you. Just real quick, a little bit about me. So I am a licensed psychologist practicing here in California, both in private practice, and then I work at a couple of local universities. I do a lot, mostly individual practice, but also do some research and different activities, and got really interested in kind of perinatal mental health, specifically way back when I was doing my master's program, and I worked with a woman who was a doula. This was the first time in my life I'd ever heard anyone talk about childbirth specifically as anything other than like awful and like terrible. Like you kind of see, all the screaming and stuff on TVs. And she kind of introduced me to the idea that kind of the experience that folks have in the process of pregnancy and labor, that can actually be empowering and something different, which was just mind blowing to me. And so from there, I really began to get interested in, the whole host of experiences that people have during kind of their reproductive life, whether it's trying to get pregnant, dealing with infertility, the things that kind of happen during pregnancy, and then obviously labor, delivery, and postpartum life. So I've been really interested in that now for a while, and really find it to be a really important thing to kind of be mindful of. And I'm hoping that today what I can kind of do is give you all some of the some good solid coping skills, but then kind of talk about how those might apply and some of the unique challenges that might happen when you are in that kind of perinatal kind of period of life. So whether you're trying to get pregnant, or kind of in that immediate postpartum time period, we'll kind of be using some examples and talking a little bit about that. So I hope you guys find that useful. Oh, hang on, click on. So, oh, there we go. So real quick, just a quick disclaimer, watching this webinar does not mean that we are entering into a patient care provider relationship. Just, I need to make that clear since I am a care provider. And also just want to kind of make note that this course is not intended as a substitute for mental health care. The skills I'll talk about today, some of them I could literally talk about for hours, that we could talk in teaching the different layers that the skills might have. So if you are finding that you really are struggling kind of above and beyond what you feel like might be something that you're able to cope with on your own, I do really encourage folks to seek out additional support. We will be sending some additional resources around and that as well after this. So, all right, before we begin, I just want to start by acknowledging the many, many impacts that COVID-19, the shelter-in-place order, if you're here in California, or the shelter-in-place order you might have in your state, that just this global pandemic might be having for folks who are watching right now. Some of you might be dealing with job loss or uncertainty, maybe uncertainty in your field, whether you're in hospitality or restaurants or academia or different fields that kind of feel really uncertain right now. This can be really hard to deal with. There might be delays in family planning. So if you are someone who was getting ready and trying to prepare to try to have a child, try to have your first child or another child, you might be questioning if now is a good time. If you are someone dealing with infertility treatments, that is very likely being disrupted by everything happening right now, which can be really difficult and painful to kind of have that happen. Those of you watching may have your own medical and health concerns, whether that is just having some predisposed condition or just being worried, not just being worried about what is happening right now that impacts all of our health. For those of you who are pregnant, I'm seeing with a lot of pregnant folks I know and work with just a huge increase in anxiety around what this all means for you. On that note, I'm not going to be able to talk a ton about that right now or today, just because I'm going to try to focus on teaching some skills. But what I will say is, based on kind of some of the latest research, we aren't seeing any evidence that folks who are pregnant are at an increased risk of having like worse outcomes, which is hopefully a little bit of good news. And we continue to see very little evidence of any transmission to fetus, which is good. For those of you who might be pregnant or thinking about becoming pregnant and who want to know more and be really up to date on the latest research, I really, really, really highly recommend the website Evidence-Based Birth. The woman who runs that website is a PhD level nurse and a researcher, and she does a really great job of breaking down what is known. She has both a weekly, I think it's a weekly newsletter, and has done a couple free webinars that are available to watch on her site. And I think if this is something that you're dealing with, again, I'm not going to be able to talk to it a lot today, but I know that it's a big anxiety point for a lot of folks I'm working with, and would really encourage you to kind of pop over there after this webinar and take a look at some of those resources, because she's doing a really nice job of just kind of presenting the facts of what's known and unknown and helping people understand that. Another thing that I'm seeing for people who either are pregnant or maybe who've recently given birth is that there might have been pretty dramatic changes to your birth plan, which either might be kind of a loss that you're coping with now or something you're worrying about. There are also a lot of losses right now of just important rituals. Baby showers are being changed. If you are recently gave birth or planning to give birth soon, then maybe your family's not going to be able to visit the way you thought. Like this kind of really important time in life, there's a lot of important rituals that just aren't quite happening the way that we usually see them happen. And then there's just this general increase in stress for a lot of people, not for everybody, but for a lot of people. They're just finding kind of coping with the news and trying to make sense of all this information increases their stress. But then also if you're working from home, and especially those of you working from home with the little ones at home, there are so many new roles you are taking on. You are teaching, you are being a full-time caregiver, which you might not have been before. Like all these new things, you're trying to help your kids understand and make sense and cope with their loss and that they can't see friends. And all of these things are really hard. And so all of these impacts, all these losses and changes to life, they absolutely can be difficult, and you may be noticing you're having all kinds of different emotional reactions, whether you're feeling anger, anxiety, sadness, fear. Maybe you're not feeling anything, you're kind of numbed out, or you might even just notice physical things, being more tired, feeling more muscle tension. This can all be signs of some of those emotional impacts of what's happening. And one thing I'm really noticing a lot is a lot of people looking around and looking at kind of the impacts that COVID-19 is having on their life and comparing it to the impacts that's having on other people's lives. And for some people, this is useful. They kind of look around and they might recognize, wow, I'm really lucky. Even though this is stressful and difficult, I have my job, I feel secure in that. And so noticing that, kind of making that comparison and recognizing that they have some things that they know other people are doing without, helps them to feel a little bit more grateful, a little bit more grounded. If that's you, that's great. Sometimes doing that kind of comparison and being able to use that to help you count your blessings can be very helpful from a mental health perspective. However, what I am seeing a lot of right now is people using that comparison to devalue and diminish their own suffering, saying, I don't really have any right to complain because everyone, all these other people have it worse than me, or I don't know anyone who's sick, so like I shouldn't be so worried. A lot of this judgment and devaluing of what you're going through. And if you're noticing you're doing that kind of comparing, I'm really going to encourage you to try to kind of let that go. We're going to talk about some specific strategies, but I just want to kind of name this off the bat, that whatever it is that you're feeling and going through, that is okay. And there isn't really a good way of weighing these losses. It's really hard to say what is bigger, what is worse, what is harder, because part of that is going to vary by each and every one of your individual experiences. So just seeing a lot of this, and it's actually going to be a theme that we kind of talk about today, which is letting go of judgment, trying not to judge ourselves, our emotions, and just allowing our emotions to be what they are. So right from the start, I just want to kind of throw that out there to everyone. And okay, why? One of the reasons why I want to invite you all to kind of try to let go of that unhelpful comparison and to let go of that judgment is because when you judge yourself, when you decide, well, I shouldn't be this anxious. I shouldn't be this upset. I shouldn't be this angry. When you fight with your emotions and thoughts, you try to push them away. You try to constantly distract yourself from them. You kind of get angry because you're feeling sad, or you get angry with yourself because you're feeling anxious. When we fight with our thoughts and emotions, when we push them away, when we do all of this stuff, it takes a ton of energy that you don't have. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of energy. And every one of you out there watching right now, you are busy. Some of you might be growing humans, trying to make humans, keeping tiny humans alive, keeping yourself alive and keeping yourself sane. You're trying to work, you're tending to your health, you're rearranging plans because the things that you thought you were going to be doing just aren't happening anymore. You're supporting your friends and family. You're doing all kinds of different stuff. And you don't have the time and the energy to be fighting with yourself, to be fighting with your emotions, and to be judging your emotions and your thoughts. So I really hope today what I can teach you will be some tools to help take some things off your plate and ideally take some of this judgment and this fight off of your plate. And that's a lot of what the skills I'm going to talk about are going to be aimed at. Because really and truly, I think right now is a time for most of us to try to be taking things off of our plate. And not just emotions, not just our fight with our emotions. For a lot of people, it's trying to take away some of the expectations we have, right? You actually can't be you can't be as productive at work and, replace all the work your children's teachers did and take care of yourself exactly the same and work out as much and, cook as much and all the other things, the ands. when you have fewer resources, which everyone does right now. There are fewer resources. You can't rely on friends. It's harder to have family come and help you. Might not be able to have the people into your house who are helping you get things done that were happening before. So really now is an important time to take things off your plate, and kind of another thing I'm going to have us really be thinking about today. So if we're going to take things off our plate, right, and what I said is one of the big things we're going to work on is taking off some of the judgment off your plate, that judgment and that fighting with your emotions off your plate. We have to start from the basic assumption that your feelings make sense, really that your feelings and your thoughts make sense, and they are not good or bad. And we're going to talk about this in a lot of different ways today, but I think this is one of the core things that can really, really be helpful in making space in our lives, in all of our lives, parent or not. But especially if you are going through that kind of journey of trying to get pregnant, being pregnant, and then that postpartum period when emotions are big, when there are big things at stake, when things feel so important. Being able to recognize that those feelings make sense and that they're not good or bad is going to be really, really important. And so one of the ways to help you actually believe this, because I can't see any of you, but when I say this to other people, I often get kind of this look like, really, Elsa? I think this anger that I feel, I don't think that, I'm feeling really angry and frustrated with my kid. I don't think that's good. That's not a good thing. You can't tell me that's good, or that's okay. This anxiety, like I feel way more anxiety than, is normal. It's not helpful for me. That's not good. Yeah, like some of you might be thinking that, and I get that. Our emotions aren't always helpful for us, but it is important to recognize that they are not good or bad, that judgment, we'll talk more about this, is going to make things harder. So if you'll stay with me despite maybe some reservations, the first thing I want to point out is our emotions actually do something for us. So this is why they're not good or bad. They just are. Our emotions just are, and they are doing important things for us. They tell us things, they communicate to other people, and they motivate us for action. So when we, folks who have maybe a young child at home, an infant, struggling with sleep, maybe you're hitting that 4-month sleep regression and you are sleep deprived and struggling to get your child back into a sleep routine or into a sleep routine. You might be waking up multiple times in the middle of the night and you might feel angry, right? And from that anger, you might then move into that judgment, feeling guilty. How can I be angry with my child? It's not their fault. They're not sleeping, right? That judgment kind of makes things harder for you. If you can listen to what that emotion's telling you, it's just giving you information. It's an important goal to sleep. Sleep is important for all of us. And it's a really normal thing that when a goal that we have is kind of interrupted, we're not getting it, to feel a little bit angry, to feel angry with that thing that's keeping us from our goals. That is just a normal human reaction. And being able to remember that our emotions are doing things for us, that this anger is just telling me something, can be useful in letting go of some of that judgment. Being able to remind yourself that's all this is. This is just a normal reaction to something happening. That can be really useful. Now, in the case of, being angry at a child who won't sleep, there's not a whole lot you can do about it in that moment. Sometimes things just are hard. We're just going to have to feel emotions. Sometimes when we listen to our emotions and notice what they're telling us, it can be really useful. It can give us information about what we need to do differently. I wasn't a psychologist in my first career. I actually started out in public relations, and I hated it. I worked for an amazing company. I had an amazing boss. I had great coworkers. Everything was really great, but I felt so unhappy every day. I felt so unfulfilled. And I spent several months really ignoring that and just thinking like something's wrong with me. Like this is, my boss is great. This company's great. Like what is wrong with me? Just judging this unhappiness and this emptiness I felt. When I finally let myself feel it and listen to that emotion, I began to recognize that I wasn't feeling very fulfilled. I wasn't feeling very rewarded, that I was feeling really just unhappy with my career. That unlocked room for me to start to problem solve and move forward. So when we listen to our emotions, sometimes the things it tells us there's not much we can do about. Still going to have to wake up and soothe that child and get them to go to sleep. but sometimes it tells us really critically important things about what we might need in life. So it's important to just recognize that, make space to listen. As I said, also, our emotions communicate to other people, right? If we're crying, especially now, many people are at home, kind of with family, with loved ones, right? When you're upset, if you're crying, if you look stressed, that communicates to the other people in your life that something's going on. That can be really useful, can help them, tend to you, take care of you, recognize that maybe you need something from them. And then finally, our emotions motivate us for action. They help us get ready to do things, whether it's anxiety that can help motivate us to get something done, or fear that motivates us to kind of protect ourselves in some way. Our emotions motivate us in important ways, and recognizing all of these things can be really, really useful. Again, we're not always going to listen. We don't always need to do what our emotions are telling us to do, but being able to notice that can be one kind of step towards letting go of that judgment of the emotion. So I really love, I hope, depending on the type of screen people have, you can kind of see this drawing from Act Auntie. She does a lot of really great, cute little drawings. And this, I think, is a nice little visualization of what I'm trying to get at. So feelings, and really our thoughts and feelings, can be like fireworks. Sometimes they're going to be big, sometimes they're going to be kind of damp and like not do a whole lot. They're just going to be different ways sometimes. And again, not good or bad. But what can happen sometimes is, if we don't want an emotion, if we're fighting with a difficult thought or emotion, if we're really struggling it, we often end up actually kind of holding on to it, and it flies away with us, right? We end up being like this guy over here, where the emotion kind of can take us away. Anybody who's familiar with kind of like a spiral of anxiety might recognize how this goes, right? We get onto one worry and then we keep going. If we're struggling, resisting, when we're resisting our emotions, they tend to get bigger. And when we're resisting our thoughts, again, it tends to just pull us into it deeper and deeper. We can come to this place on the other side of the screen where we can just try to notice the emotion, recognize that it's there, not fight with it, not judge it. It can be easier to just sit in it, and the emotion will kind of come and go. The thoughts will come and go on their own. Now, this is harder, easier said than done, so let's talk about a couple of skills for this. The first set of skills I want to kind of highlight are a set of skills, mindfulness skills, that come from Marsha Linehan's dialectical behavior therapy program. And I'm just sharing this so if you guys are interested, that's something you can learn more about. DBT has a lot of really useful coping skills. Because mindfulness can sometimes be a pretty loaded word, kind of culturally, I like to kind of talk about it also as just mindful awareness. And cultivating a sense of some mindful awareness or mindfulness, whatever word you prefer, can be really useful, because it actually is going to help you get in touch with, like, what am I feeling? What is this emotion telling me? What is it communicating? What is it urging me to do? It can kind of help you notice some of those things. It can also be useful to just be more mindfully aware as a general rule. But let's talk about what that means first. So mindful awareness or mindfulness has kind of two sets of skills. First, there are the what skills. This is what are we doing when we're trying to be mindful? The first thing we're doing is we observe. And this is literally just noticing. Each and every one of you right now can just kind of take a look around your room. Or just take a moment and look. What do you observe? What can you see? You can just observe all kinds of things in your room. You can observe what's happening internally. Just kind of checking in with yourself. You might be able to notice where there's muscle tension or emotion, thoughts. We can observe all of that. We can also describe. So describe is just putting words to what we've observed. So if I were to kind of check in right now and observe, I might observe like a little bit of tension in the pit of my stomach. I kind of have an urge to talk faster and faster and faster. I know for me, that's a little bit of anxiety. I notice, I can describe and notice I have this thought of like, I hope I'm making sense to everybody. I hope this is feeling helpful to people, right? I can kind of observe and then describe what my internal experiences are. I could do the same. I could describe what's happening in the room around me. So it's just a way of bringing some awareness. So often we're kind of rushing through our life. So much is happening that we just don't notice. And it can be really helpful to be able to at times slow down and just notice. The last thing we can do in terms of being mindful is to participate. That's just to engage in whatever activity we're doing. One thing I find that kind of trips people up is they think if I'm going to participate in something mindfully, that means I'm like calm and zen. I feel really good in this activity. That's not the case, right? We can participate with this, again, mindful awareness, maybe instead of mindfulness, if for you mindfulness is too attached to calm. We can participate even when we're feeling anxious, right? I'm here, I'm engaging in this discussion. I'm hopefully communicating with you all in a way that feels helpful. That's what I'm focusing on. I'm doing this even though I feel a little anxious, right? I can feel a little anxious and I can still participate and be here. And so that is a really useful skill. We can use this again right now when we're home with our families, even when you're feeling cooped up in cabin fever, right? You can try to participate, engage in the activity you're doing and focusing on what's happening in the now, letting those thoughts of the cabin fever kind of happen, let them happen in the background, but focus your attention on that thing that you're doing, on participating. So that's briefly the what skills. The how skills are kind of how we would do these things. And the first one, which we'll actually talk a little bit more about on the next slide, is non-judgmentally. So I think I've said the word judgment or non-judgment or something version of that probably 100 times already. Slight exaggeration. But I've said that a number of times because learning how to let go of judgment and really more importantly to notice when you are judging is so critical. It can be so useful because we do engage in so much judgment. And when we're engaged in judgment, it can really just interfere with a lot of things. It tends to make our emotions bigger. It can make a lot of things more difficult. So if we can observe, if we can describe, if we can participate from a place of not judging, not deciding if it's good or bad, that's really useful. So when I was describing some of what I'm feeling right now related to my anxiety, I'm not judging it as good or bad. I'm not deciding if I should feel anxious or shouldn't. I'm not deciding if that emotion that I'm feeling is something that I need to push away because I don't want it because it's not good. I'm just noticing that it's there, just non-judgmentally recognizing it. Then when we're trying to cultivate this kind of mindful awareness, we're going to do things one at a time, one mindfully, meaning just bringing all of our attention. This is one of the things I think is really difficult for parents, for folks who are trying to be parents, for folks who are pregnant, because there's just so many other demands on your attention, whether it is like, I have this tiny human and I'm always kind of half thinking about if they're okay, or I'm pregnant and maybe there's a part of you that's kind of continually thinking about like, are you doing the things that you need to do? Are you taking care of yourself? Is my partner taking care of themselves? Or if you're trying to be pregnant, there's a lot of ways, right, that kind of taxes your mind and that part of your attention tends to be in those worries and those concerns. So the goal is, one, we're not going to judge that happens. But the more that you can at times practice being really focused just on one thing, whether it's just on the activity you're doing, just trying to notice and describe what's going on in a given moment, that is a useful skill worth trying to build and cultivate. It definitely takes time, but it can be done. And then the last piece of being mindful is we want to do things effectively. So there is definitely a time, right? We already talked briefly about the fact that our emotions tell us things. So it is really useful sometimes to just spend a chunk of time in that observing and then describing. Maybe you're feeling really worried about something and being able to describe and kind of name, what are your thoughts? What are those worry thoughts? What's bothering you? Spending some time doing that can be really useful. It can help you understand what it is you're worried about, can help you maybe identify things that you need to problem solve or work on. It can be really effective to spend a little bit of time in that. You might also recognize after a while, it gets harder and harder to kind of stay grounded and you just start to kind of spin into more and more and maybe bigger and bigger worries. It becomes less effective. Right now, I'm not going to sit and spend a lot of time sitting with describing my anxiety, right? I'm going to focus on participating because my goal isn't to feel my anxiety. My goal is to teach you guys. So being effective is just about doing what works and knowing what your goal is in that moment. I think this is really important, and I really want to kind of highlight one thing about this, which is you're allowed to find skills and things we talk about not effective for you. Not everything is going to work at every moment, and not every skill is going to work for you, period. And I often talk to people who get really frustrated that something's not working for them. They've maybe been trying meditation for a while and they're just finding like every time I sit down to meditate, I just get more frustrated and angry with myself. Then that's not effective right now for you. And that's okay. If you're trying to do things to meditate, to calm, if you're trying to do new activities to distract yourself or to find something fun and it's not working for you, that's okay. Right? Focus on doing the things that do work and kind of letting go of the pressure to make all the skills work or to make all the things you're doing work for you, because that's just not going to be realistic. Okay, so this is a little bit about what we're going to do if we're trying to kind of be mindfully aware in any moment. You're going to observe, potentially you're going to describe, or you're going to participate, and you're going to do those things non-judgmentally, one at a time, one mindfully, and effectively doing what works. Just a quick little bit more on that idea of non-judgment. So if we're moving towards non-judgment, it's helpful to sometimes think about it as this kind of continuum where on one side there's judgment and on the other side there's this non-judgment. Actually, somewhere in the middle is assumptions. A lot of times we make assumptions. And it's really useful to just kind of notice that if you are kind of in a place where you're making a lot of assumptions, because actually sometimes when we're making assumptions, we can be making it from information we know, but it can also really be colored by kind of our mood, and actually if we're also in a place of a lot of judgment. So an example of this might be, for those of you who are kind of sheltering in place with a spouse or a partner, you might, hear them kind of like slam some cabinets in the kitchen or something. And depending on how your day is going potentially, you might think like, make the assumption like, oh, they're mad, right? That's an assumption you don't really know. And then you might make a judgment. I bet they're mad at me about whatever. And that's not okay, right? That they shouldn't be mad. They're not allowed to be mad. They don't have any reason to be mad. You're going to make a judgment that their anger is not okay, not good. And you're making the assumption about why they're angry. Totally normal thing. We all do this. What's useful is being able to notice that you're doing it so you don't act from that place. So you kind of are aware, like, I don't actually know. Can I go check in with them? So some ways to kind of catch yourself in this pattern is, you're in judgment if you're kind of deciding something is good or bad, if something should or shouldn't be. That's a good cue for you. You're in judgment. And you kind of know you're in this place of non-judgment if you're just noticing the facts. Right? If you can kind of just say calmly, like, my partner is slamming the doors. I have a thought that they're angry. I may be feeling a little angry or defensive because I'm not sure what's going on. Now that is kind of a non-judgmental stance. Gives you a little bit more space to kind of move forward and helps you make sure you're not acting out of that place of judgment or assumption. And why is that important? For a couple of reasons. One, when we get stuck in judgment, right, we tend to only see one side. Our emotions grow really extreme and it can be really hard to find a way forward. So in that example with our partner, if we're kind of stuck in a judgment of them, right, we start to just kind of get a little polarized. Our emotions tend to grow. And then we're probably not thinking usefully about how we move forward, how we find out if they really are mad at us. We might just end up going and walking in there and being like, what's wrong with you? And our tone of voice, all of that is maybe going to make the situation a little bit worse. When we can come out of that judgment, it can sometimes be a little bit easier to see like, all right, well, they're slamming the cabinets. I'm feeling kind of defensive. I'm having the thought that they're angry. And I don't really know what's going on. Can maybe make it a little bit easier to go in and ask, right? Because we're not going to kind of have that emotions grow. The other thing is when we're stuck in judgment of ourselves, or especially when we're stuck in judgment of our own emotions, we tend to compound it. Again, those emotions get really strong. If I'm feeling angry and I've decided that like anger isn't a good emotion, some people kind of grow up and believe that anger isn't useful, isn't helpful. So I don't want to feel angry. Then I judge that anger. And now I'm not only feeling that anger, but I'm feeling that self-judgment. Maybe I start to feel guilt and shame. I'm starting to feel other things, which again, that emotion's growing. It's harder for me to figure out the way forward because I'm not actually letting myself listen to and figure out what that anger might be telling me. So really, really important. So I want to come back. I know you've already seen this picture, but I want to come back to this. Hopefully it makes a little bit more sense now, right? So if our feelings and our thoughts are actually going to pass, you know, and they're going to come and go on their own time, then we can see when we struggle with them, we can get carried away, especially because when we struggle, we're probably almost always getting stuck in some judgment. We're fighting with that emotion, that thought, because we don't like it. It's not good. We don't want to have it. I can't handle it. And that emotion gets bigger. Other things kind of compound and it carries us away. We can come back to this place like this guy over here, right? He's saying like, oh, hey, I'm noticing anxiety. I may not want it or like it, but I can drop the struggle and allow it to be here. He's just describing what's happening, right? There's just a description. This is there. Makes it a lot easier to kind of just sit back. Now, there are some other ways to do this. So that kind of bringing mindful awareness, being able to especially describe non-judgmentally what's going on is one way of helping you kind of step back and just notice your emotions. There's also a set of skills called diffusion skills. This is some of the examples I've adapted from a gentleman named Stephen Hayes, who developed acceptance and commitment therapy. These are some other ways to get a little bit of distance and to help yourself not get carried away by that firework. So you can do things like labeling, and this is really like describing, like I mentioned, I'm having the thought that. This is really useful, especially when we're having like self-judgment thoughts, like I'm having the thought that I'm a bad mom, right? Not I'm a bad mom. You repeat that over and over to yourself, it becomes true. There's so much emotional content in that, it gets harder to see the other side. But I'm having the thought that I'm a bad mom can just help give you a little bit of distance from that. Naming the story. So if there's kind of, a lot of times we have themes. Our brain, you know, will have themes of like, this is why I'm never going to get pregnant. This is why I'm a bad parent. This is why, you know, I'm not good enough. This is why whatever, right? And there's a lot of pieces to that. We might notice a lot of different things, constantly notice things that we feel like we're doing wrong, things that we're, you know, we're judging ourselves for, and they kind of can fit in those themes. And so if you can name that story, whether it's like, this is the story of why Elsa isn't good enough. Okay, there it is. What that can help me do is just, I don't even have to notice all of those thoughts. I just know there it is, there's the story. I'm kind of labeling it as a story. Stories aren't true. It helps me, again, not attach to it, not get carried away on that firework, not believe it quite as much. It's not like a switch. It's not like you're going to go to not believing it at all, but it begins to help you get a little bit of distance. And that is a really, really, really important first step. The more distance you have, the more you can go from believing something in your heart to kind of letting that go. So that can be really useful. Another way to do this is to like say things in a silly voice. So a lot of people have different ways of doing this. I've had a few people who, when they know they're saying mean things to themselves, or they're saying kind of judgmental things about kind of other people they care about, they're kind of getting caught in the judgment. They'll say it in like Dobby's voice from Harry Potter, or other famous people's voice, or they'll say it kind of in the tone of voice of someone that they really don't like, and that'll help them believe it a little bit less. So that can be really useful as well. Just another diffusion skill. You can also use imagery. So sometimes you can actually like imagine, if anyone remembers like the old Microsoft Word screen where it had a word that would like get smaller and bigger and kind of move around the computer screen. You can kind of imagine whatever it is you're saying, that judgment or that painful thought, like that. Just makes it, again, a little bit less real. One of my favorite comes from a client I worked with a few years ago, and she would kind of picture, she called it her flying monkeys. So that part of her that was really critical and would kind of say really mean and judgmental things, she'd say, oh, those are my flying monkeys, and kind of like shoo them away. Like, I don't need to listen to you, flying monkeys. And that was really helpful for her, both the act of kind of recognizing like those thoughts aren't really accurate, and oh, it's just the flying monkeys. And I think that action of kind of shooing was a nice way of like really helping her let go, disconnect from those thoughts, and recognize that they weren't really accurate. It was just judgment. It was inaccurate information that she didn't have to buy into. So that can be really useful, doing a few of these things. And again, right, the goal is we want to get things off your plate. So the more that you can let go of the fight with your thoughts and with your emotions, though it's all energy that you can stop wasting, and kind of take some of that fight off your plate. So hopefully some of those things will be helpful. Now, in addition to kind of letting go of some of that fight, right? We want to take some of that fight off your plate. I also want to talk to you today about how you can focus on some things that are in your control that might be helpful. I I am not deviating from my stance of everyone needs to get things off their plate. As we move into this next step, I'm not gonna, my goal isn't to give you more things to do to help you be more productive. I am seeing this theme everywhere, and it is driving me a little, which is a judgment. I am very much judging this pattern I'm noticing. But I find it to be really unhelpful, and it caused me a lot of pain. This urge that I have to be more productive, that somehow in this time, when there's all this struggle, when there's all these losses, when there's all this anxiety, that I'm supposed to be more productive than ever before. I don't think that is useful or helpful for most people. And so as we move on to focusing on what you can control, right? Letting go of the fight and the worries, trying to let go of that, the fight and the judgment of your thoughts and your feelings, and focusing on what you can control. My goal isn't to kind of help you be more productive, but my goal is to help you focus on what are the things you can control that help you take care of yourself and do the things that are important to you and do the things that kind of build you up. So if we're going to do that, we actually do have to start with things you can't control. Really, really important, because sometimes these things get confused. So, can't control your thoughts. I haven't actually explicitly said this. Hopefully it's come through a little bit, but none of us really control our thoughts, right? We can kind of put thoughts into our mind, right? So if we notice a thought of like, oh, I'm a bad mom, we can say, okay, I'm having the thought that I'm a bad mom. Right now we have that new thought. But you don't totally control your thought. And I think this is so important, again, especially during this kind of perinatal period of life, because there's so many thoughts that you can have that can be really, really painful. Whether it's thoughts about, not being a good parent, not doing the things that you need to do, judging yourself. If you are pregnant, oh my goodness, there is no shortage of judgment out there in the world for what you should do or shouldn't do, or you absolutely have to do and you absolutely have to not do. All of these rules about pregnancy, and it becomes so easy to judge yourself as not doing enough, not taking care enough. Maybe that means you don't care enough about your child. These are all thoughts that you can't totally control. If you are a parent, you have a little one, we can sometimes have actually really scary thoughts about not wanting, not wanting to be a mom. Maybe, oh, did I make a mistake? Like, our brain can just do all kinds of things. It can make, it could just make these different thoughts that might be scary, disturbing, really painful. So important to recognize it's just thoughts, and none of us have total control. What's happening is our brain tries to solve problems, and sometimes our brain just tries to solve problems in ways that aren't very useful. And so that's, I think one way you can think about this is if anyone's ever had a problem with a computer, and you wanted to throw that computer out the window, you just have thought like, oh my gosh, I just want to throw this computer out the window. That's not useful, right? That's not going to solve the problem. But what your brain is doing is saying, this computer is irritating me, I want to throw my computer out the window. You're not going to do it. You're not going to act on it. That's just a thought. And so other thoughts related to parenting, how you're doing parenting, all of those kind of especially judgmental, painful thoughts, they're just thoughts. It's often just your brain trying to solve a problem. And the more you can recognize this and recognize that you can't control it, which means the thoughts actually aren't dictating anything about you. They don't mean that you're a good or bad parent. It's just the way your brain works. That's going to be really useful. Similarly, you can't control your feelings. We can do things to help us change our feelings or shift our feelings or kind of protect us from feeling like stress. But we can't totally control our feelings, both for the positive or for the negative. Things, right, are going to make you angry. Things are going to make you sad. Things are going to make you happy. It's just not one of those things that's totally in your control. And recognizing this is really, really important. Well, part of the reason for that is hopefully that helps you let go of that judgment, because, right, you can't be held responsible. You can't be guilty of doing something wrong if you didn't control that thought or feeling. We also can't control the future. If anyone out there, if you can control the future, let me know in the Q&A. I'd like to know your secret, but I'm willing to bet no one can control the future. We can't control other people. This is really important, I think, right now when many of us are kind of spending all of our time with a very small number of people. It can feel like, you know, sometimes there do things that bother you and you can't control them. Parents, you don't control your kids, no matter what age they are, right? You don't control each other. So really important, a lot of times, a lot of the pain and the suffering people have is because they're making a lot of efforts to try to control other people. And recognizing the limits of your control are super important. This is a scary one, but you don't control if you get sick, and you don't control if your loved ones get sick. Again, you can do some things to minimize this, but none of us have total control over that. And this is one of the things where anxiety can get really out of whack, because anxiety can kind of push us to do more and more and more and be more rigid and follow more rules because we're trying to control if something happens. But there's no way of 100% guaranteeing anyone that you don't get sick. And so recognizing some of that will be really important in kind of figuring out what are the limits of your control, what are the risks and things that you can live with, what are the ones that you can't. And that's a decision we all have to make for ourselves. Finally, we don't control what larger systems do. And this is really important because, you know, you may not be happy with kind of decisions being made at a bigger scale, whether it's your company or the government or whatever, and we don't control that. So there is a skill that you can use for things you can't control. And this is one of my favorite skills. It's a skill called radical acceptance. Now, what's really, really important, radical acceptance is not about saying something is okay. When I'm going to talk about trying to accept things, trying to radically accept things, it doesn't mean that you agree that it's okay, that it's a good thing, that you're happy it happened. In fact, very often we are radically accepting things that we're not thrilled about. It's just about allowing reality to be what it is. We also, really importantly, can only really radically accept something that's happened or what's happening in the present moment. We can't accept into the future. So this is something I see with folks I've worked with who've been pregnant. Their body changes and they'll say, okay, well, I just have to radically accept that I'm not going to like my body anymore. No, that is not what we radically accept. One, there's a lot of judgment there. We don't accept judgment, and it also is kind of into the future. And we don't know what's going to happen in the future. You might need to radically accept that your body is different in this moment, that maybe, you know, you've gained some weight or clothes you really like don't fit, or you might need to accept that you feel kind of uncomfortable right now in your body, but you don't have to accept that forever and ever because we don't know the future. And that's more of kind of like giving up rather than just accepting like, yeah, this is kind of painful right now. It's uncomfortable to be in a different body for some folks, and that's okay. It's important to listen to that feeling and figure out what you might need to do. So as a little example of this, and why radical acceptance is important, is because we all experience pain. And right, it can be anger, sadness, pain can be a lot of different things, but we all will face many, many times in our life when something happens that we didn't want to happen, something happens that hurts us, that makes us upset, that distresses us. Right now we're living through a pandemic, and that is kind of painful. There's all the consequences of that we can't change and we can't control. And so there's this pain that we just have to walk around with and carry. We can't do anything about it. But what happens when we don't accept is then we start to add layers. So let's say that I am, again, going back to that example of I'm a person postpartum, and I am feeling distressed about my body. And so, right, my body is shifted, and now I have this kind of pain. And now I don't like the way that my body is right now. And maybe I have a daughter. Okay, so I have this pain because I'm uncomfortable in my body. And now I'm going to add this guilt and shame of, oh my gosh, I don't like my body, and I'm going to teach my daughter not to like her body. And that, right, and now I feel guilty about that because I don't like my body. This isn't okay. And now I'm going to teach that to her. So now I have this emotion, and now I have this layer of guilt and shame because I'm worried about what it means that I don't like my body and how that's going to impact other people, right? And then there's that judgment. This means I'm going to be a bad mom, and I'm going to scar her, and this isn't okay. And now maybe I get angry, like, why do I always just, I can never seem to figure out how to be a good role model. And like, I've never liked my body. And why do I always come back to this? Why can't I just like my body? Now I'm angry, and now I'm judging myself. And I have all of these layers. And hopefully you all see what's happened. My pain got a lot bigger. Acceptance is about coming back to this, right? Finding the way to radically accept and allow our pain to exist without judging it so that we don't add to it. And a lot of the skills we've talked about already, just being able to observe and describe what's upsetting, trying to notice what that emotion is communicating, sitting with it in non-judgment, that can kind of help you move towards that radical acceptance. Now, for what you can control, right, there are things you can control. And for that, we do want to kind of talk about some stuff. So the biggest thing that you can control is what you do. We can all control what we do in the present moment, right? We can control how we respond to our emotions, to our thoughts, how we respond to the people and the environment around us. That is the biggest thing any of us have control over. So how do we kind of do that in a way that's effective? Because that's the challenge. Being able to respond in a way that we feel good about, or we feel comfortable, where we're dealing with our emotions in a way that feels healthy and effective, that is much more easily said than done. So I'm actually going to walk through a little bit of an example here, but what can be useful to help you respond in a good way is to do something called drop the anchor. Okay, when we drop anchor, we actually kind of take 3 steps. We start with acknowledging our thoughts and feelings. So that goes back to that kind of describing and just noticing. Then you come back into your body, and then you try to engage in what you're doing. So I'm going to ask all of you right now to kind of walk through this with me and just kind of notice the impact of it on you. So let's just take a couple breaths. And just in this moment, I want you all to just notice your thoughts. Notice what you might be feeling. And just try not to judge. Just notice what's there. And do your best to not label it or to see it as good or bad. So you might just say to yourself, okay, I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling antsy, whatever it is, just notice that. Okay. Now we're going to come into your body. So take a couple breaths. Doesn't have to be like any special kind of breath, just breathe. See if you can notice right now in your body a couple physical sensations. Maybe there's muscle tension. Maybe it's just the feel of your seat kind of on the back of your legs. Notice those physical sensations. And now just try to stretch a little bit. Maybe just stretch your neck. Put your arms forward. Just kind of stretch and just feel that sensation in your body. And now I want you to engage in what's happening right now. Look around the room. Just kind of tune into your senses. What are you seeing? Do you smell anything? Do you taste anything? Do you hear anything? Just fully attend to what's happening right now. Okay, that's how you begin to drop an anchor. Now, when we're in a place of a lot of distress, that is not magically going to make everything better. And sometimes you want to go through that exercise of, again, just noticing, okay, now what am I feeling? Then come back into your body, then look around the room again, and you might need to do that a few times. The exercise can be really useful for just bringing you back down and helping you begin to be in a place where you're going to be able to respond more effectively, right? You control your behavior. So if you can kind of get yourself back into your body, into the room, out of the thoughts and emotions and the judgment, that's going to help you kind of move forward from a little bit more of an effective place. So dropping the anchor is another kind of ACT technique, and it's also part of this larger skill called Face COVID, which was developed by Russ Harris, who's he writes a lot on acceptance and commitment therapy. I'm actually in a PDF you guys are all going to get at the end of this, going to include that whole skill. It has a lot more pieces to it. Just that drop anchor can be something really useful to do throughout the day for yourself, especially if you're transitioning between different tasks, or if you're finding yourself feeling really frustrated, feeling really angry. If you notice you're really stuck in a lot of judgment, just trying to do that drop anchor can be really helpful. But also just want you guys to know that we're going to send you that bigger PDF with the kind of longer skill, if that might be useful for you as well. Hopefully, as some of you noticed, maybe notice feeling a little bit calmer once you drop the anchor. You're not always going to feel calmer. The goal isn't necessarily for it to shift your emotions, but for it to kind of bring your awareness to where you're back kind of in the moment and your body not as much in your head. Because from that place, you have a lot more ability to kind of control how you respond. You have a lot more control over your behavior and your next steps once you kind of dropped that anchor. So you can kind of control if you do that, which is useful. Something else you can control are some daily practices. So one of the last things I want to offer you guys, I realize we're going to try to stop at the hour, but we'll probably go a few minutes longer. We should still have plenty of time for questions. But one of the other things you can control is trying to set up some positive daily practices. So the first one is do. So do something pleasant every day. Go back. So let me just give you an example, because some of you might be saying, I'm really busy. I do not have time to do something pleasant every day. One of my something pleasant today is this taco. I was not entirely sure about the layout of this PowerPoint once you see the final slide. But once I saw that the graphic that, the gremlins that be in PowerPoint picked for this was a taco, it just made me happy. I just think it's silly and funny. And so sometimes doing something pleasant can be something as little as allowing a graphic to exist in a presentation that just puts a smile on your face. Doing something pleasant every day doesn't have to take a lot of time. It doesn't have to take a lot of resources. My other favorite do something pleasant every day is, one of them is on days when I have therapy sessions. In between, I go sometimes just for a minute, 2 minutes, and I go outside my front door if it's sunny, and I feel the sun on my face, and I close my eyes, and I just try to feel the sun and kind of just be in that moment and like pay attention to the warmth. My husband and I joke that I'm a lizard because I love to be in the sun. That can be something pleasant. One of the things that's difficult is, especially for those of you who seem to be busier, who are busy caring for children right now, we neglect our own needs and we don't take care and don't do things to kind of help us enjoy our life day to day. And those of you who are parents to little kids, you probably intuitively know that, like, if you were to ask your kid to go through a whole day and not do anything they enjoyed, you would be meltdown city, probably not even halfway through the day, right? Like, they need to do some things throughout the day that they enjoy. We're not really that different. Adults need that too. We all need to find some pleasant moments. So do think about every day, where can you find something pleasurable? It could just be giving yourself a little extra time in the shower to just enjoy. One of the secrets to this is actually that idea of savoring it. Doesn't have to take a long time, but you do need to take a moment to really savor the moment. So when I close my eyes and I feel the sun, I really do just, oh, this feels so good. I notice that. If it's, your morning cup of coffee, giving yourself a minute to just really notice how that tastes, really pay attention and savor and enjoy that moment. That's going to help that kind of really count for you. You're really going to register that, and it can really help, again, give you a little bit of a buffer against stress. The other thing you can do is really try to listen to your needs. Because of time, I'm not going to go through this exercise, but there's this great book, which is also listed for you guys, called Compassion for Parents, by Susan Polak. And she has this great reflection on, what do I need? And really what you try to do for that reflection is just take a moment and kind of, close your eyes, take a few breaths, and ask yourself, like, what do I need? What do I really need? We so rarely ask ourselves that question and allow ourselves to notice what comes up. That just doing that, maybe not even every day, but a couple of times a week, checking in with yourself and noticing what you need can be really useful and really important. You might start out with, sometimes it's like, oh, I just need a vacation. And maybe that's not possible. But if you keep kind of asking, you can start to get to kind of what's underneath that need. Maybe it's that you need a little bit more sleep. Maybe it's that you're feeling unappreciated. Trying to notice what it is that you need and listen to that. I actually encourage people to, like, write it down when you're done. It can help you start to notice what are things that are missing. And then ideally you can go about trying to get those things, whether it's asking a partner for something, whether it's tending to your own needs if possible, can be really, really useful. Another thing you do have control of is to try to create. So you can actually create things like the art brush would suggest, but I'm really big on trying to create some daily rituals. This is helpful for adults. This is super helpful for children. One of the places I see people get caught up is that they think it has to be like big and elaborate. So one of my biggest rituals that I'm really clinging to right now that's super helpful is I work upstairs, and at the end of the day, I go downstairs. And like, I'm really training myself. Like, I'm not working downstairs. I used to when I went to work. Sometimes I'd sit at my kitchen table and work. I don't anymore. I work upstairs. Downstairs is where I kind of relax and do other things. So that like just going down the stairs for me at the end of a workday is a nice ritual of kind of helping me switch my switch gears. Creating rituals, whether it's around bedtime, morning routines. For parents who are working from home, I really encourage creating a little bit of a ritual around when you move from parenting to doing childcare. And it can be actually like that drop anchor, like giving yourself a minute, 2 minutes to just drop anchor from work and kind of calm down, and then, center yourself and know you're going to go into doing childcare. Like, that can be really helpful at just giving yourself a little bit of a ritual to kind of signal to yourself that there is this change. And again, that's something you can control that can be really useful. It's also really helpful because if you're finishing a workday and your stress is kind of up here, dropping that anchor, even if the stress doesn't change, it will help your mind shift that like you're not at work anymore. Now you're in parenting. It can kind of make it a little bit easier for you not to respond from that stress to your kids. One thing I'm seeing is parents are going from a stressful work into that stressful parenting, but they're bringing that work stress and then they're responding to their kids from that place of stress or anger. And then there's guilt about that. You feel bad, and it kind of creates this really unhelpful spiral. Another thing I really encourage people to think about is to find meaningful connections, and then let go of those that aren't working. With this meaningful connections, one of the things I'm also seeing with folks who are, again, if you're sheltering in place with a partner, is you might be spending more time than ever with them, but you might be actually spending less meaningful time. So making sure you're finding moments to connect around something meaningful, whether it's, again, a ritual around at the end of the day, are you going to talk about, was there something positive today? What was a worry today? Just something to help you connect more. That can be with your spouse, your partners, with your children, with whoever's kind of in your home. Also trying to connect to your family and friends, whether it's through Zoom, through telephone, whatever that might be. But the other side of that is let go of those connections that aren't working. And that's not like maybe this person, maybe it is a whole person. Sometimes it's just like today, that's not a connection I need, right? Today, I actually don't want to go to this Zoom happy hour because I'm really exhausted. Maybe I need time for myself. And so giving yourself permission to both like focus on those meaningful connections, but not do them when they're not working for you. And then finally, what you want to do is respect your own boundaries. This is going to, again, come back to really listening to your emotions. Our emotions are usually what tell us if we are past our own boundaries or not. And a really important piece of this is letting go of your expectations. So again, there's all this expectation to be productive, to do more, to take on these roles, to like work as good as you ever were, to be a parent as good as you were a parent, and to be a teacher as good as the actual teachers are, and to do all of these things. If you can kind of let go of those expectations and kind of respect your boundaries and your limits, you're going to be able to much more effectively move through day to day, and that's going to be really helpful. It's also really important to recognize that, yes, even children can also like learn to respect boundaries. Obviously, very, very little children, not so much, but once they get school age, helping them understand like when you're in a meeting, what are the appropriate times to come in, like actually setting some of that time, giving yourself that space can be really important, and kind of talking with your kids so you're not kind of interrupted quite as much. It's never going to be perfect, but that can be really important. And I'm also seeing parents feel really responsible for making sure their children are always entertained. So again, I think like you're going to kind of cross all your own boundaries. If you are trying to make sure your child is always entertained, you're just going to end up overextending yourself. So letting go of that expectation is actually good for kids to be bored from time to time. So if that's something you're kind of holding on to, I encourage you to try to work on letting that go. So these are some daily practices, right, that you can. So one thing I just want to acknowledge as we're kind of wrapping up is I know we started this thing saying, like, right, you don't really have a lot of time or energy. We need to take some things off your plate. And I also know I'm asking you to do some things differently with these skills that I presented. I hope that some of them will take some things off your plate. Some of it will also take work and practice and a little bit of effort. And that is just, both of those things are true, and finding the balance, taking from this what works for you, practicing when you're able to, and also just being kind to yourself when you're not, when you fall back into old patterns, when you know you're doing something that's maybe not effective, but like, it's just hard. We all kind of are far from perfect, and kind of giving yourself some grace is really important. So real quick summary, trying to work on kind of just bringing that mindful awareness, noticing what's happening, being able to notice your emotions, moving towards that non-judgmental stance, just noticing what the facts are, letting go of the judgment. It doesn't need to be right or wrong. Radically accepting what you can't control, and then dropping anchor and kind of finding some daily practices that you can control to help you feel more grounded and more effective. Some really good resources, and again, I'm going to share these with you all. There is this really cool, in the PDF you'll send this, My COVID 2020 time capsule for those of you who have little kids. It has some really cool activities and things you can do with them to kind of like document this time in a way that hopefully it can feel a little bit more helpful. And then you'll get all of these links, but this Right Now I Am Fine, there's a book and there's a PDF. They're free, they're downloadable. I'm sorry, it's a PDF and then there's a coloring book version of it. And it is a lovely, lovely little book to read, especially with young children. And it actually kind of teaches a little grounding exercise for, especially if you have little ones who might be kind of anxious with things going on right now. This, I would really, really recommend taking a look at that. And I've actually used the book. I've read it kind of aloud to some of my adult skills groups and kind of used it as a mindfulness exercise with adults. So you might also enjoy it. Some of these other websites and things that are up here in the PDF I've sent out, I've got some information on what's useful there, just some different kinds of tip sheets and things that I have found really useful and tried to kind of bring those together for you. And then just in closing, so obviously a really important resource is Blossom Birth. That's great if you are here in the Bay Area, but their things are also all via Zoom right now or online. So I know if there are folks here who are from other places, they have a lot of really wonderful resources. This is kind of why I wanted to partner with them to be able to do this webinar for you all. And if you're able, if there's anybody out there who is able, if you found this webinar helpful or if you enjoy the things Blossom does, I know right now they are kind of in the midst of doing some fundraising to make sure that they're going to be able to continue to provide services to the community. So if you're able to, that'd be, I know, really helpful for them if you wanted to be able to donate. So, all right. I am done. I hope those things made sense. If folks have any questions, please let me know.
Yes, if anybody has any questions, first of all, thank you so much, Elsa. That was awesome. Yeah, if people have questions, please raise your hand or type your question in the Q&A area. And Elsa can totally answer it.
Yeah.
Yeah, please feel free to ask anything. However, if you don't have any questions and you are on your way, oh great, there's a question from Dominique. How can we explain to our kids how long this will go on?
So I think what's really hard, Dominique, is that we don't know how long this is going to go on. So I think that's a really hard thing to explain to kids. But I think what can be useful is just being a little bit honest with them about that, depending, on the kids, the age. I know that can feel really hard. But I think talking with them about, one, that you understand that they want to know how long things will go on, but that you don't actually know that answer, but reminding them that they are safe, that you are going to, that they're going to be as a family, that you guys are going to be there as a family together, that's going to be, that you guys are going to get through this. What they're really looking for is that sense of safety. And so that's what you kind of want to offer. You don't want to give them false information. Kids do remember, like they're really good at remembering, some, I guess. My little sister, when she was a baby, we just told her she'd get everything mañana. And tomorrow never came, which I think my mom got really lucky that she was one of the kids who wasn't so good with that. But a lot of little kids will remember. So I think being honest with them about, like, we don't really know exactly how long this will go on, but that we're okay, we're safe together as a family. I really think that the book, the Right Now I Am Fine, might be something that you could read together with them. That can be really helpful. And then also the National Child Traumatic Stress Network has a really great resource, and it's actually linked. So when you get the PDF, the hyperlink I put in is right to the actual page where they have a couple different resources with talking points and activities you can do with kids broken down by age. So they can go into a little bit more detail about what might be some more useful things based on the child's age. So I would really highly recommend taking a look at that, if that sounds good. Yeah. All right, any other questions?
Cindy has a question.
Yeah.
My children are now wanting to come into bed with us now more than before COVID. Comments? We've been allowing it so they know they're safe.
Yeah, so this is something that we're actually seeing a lot with kids, and I would suggest, yeah, allowing kind of a temporary change to what might be the typical rules makes sense, just to help them feel safe and secure. Obviously, depending on how long this goes on, at some point you might need to work on shifting them back to their bed. And at that point, I would recommend kind of, talking with them about kind of why that is, and kind of preparing them for that as it gets closer, probably doing some of the same things you did when you move them into, from crib to their own bed, those kinds of things. I'm not going to say there's not a length of time, right? That is good or bad. I think you're going to know for your own family when that's arrangement's not working for you anymore. And I would really encourage you to kind of trust yourself, but that's absolutely something we're seeing. I'm not a child psychologist, so I don't want to say that I'm an expert on that, but I was attending some talk with some of the folks at Stanford last week, and was just hearing how this is something that's coming up a lot with the kids, and that as a general rule, kind of giving them that temporary change and letting them sleep with you can be really helpful in helping the kids feel safe. And right now, that's especially for kids who might tend to be a little bit more anxious, that's going to be really, really important. Helping them feel, again, safe and secure is going to be the best thing in terms of long-term their mental health. So yeah, sounds like you're doing exactly the right thing. Any other questions? Right.
Well, if anybody does have more questions, here's a question just popped up, an anonymous question. Not that anyone here is dealing with it, but do you have resources for if folks might feel unsafe at home right now?
Yes, you know what? That is a great question. And I need to. So depending on where you are, I think that a lot of the different domestic violence, so whatever the domestic violence resource center is in your area, is going to be a really good place to start. One, that's because those centers aren't, so I want to say, we tend to think about those centers as being more for like maybe within a relationship if someone feels unsafe. but for like college students who might feel unsafe because their parents or siblings or things like that, or other relationship dynamics, even roommates, that kind of thing, they're going to be really well prepared to kind of help you find whatever local resources are kind of, sometimes it's by county or by city. So they're going to be best able to do that, and also to talk to people about, you know, safety planning and that kind of thing. And then, oh, there is I'm trying to remember. I know there was a more national hotline that was doing something related to that. I am just not remembering what it is right now. I'm trying to look at my notes and I'm just not seeing it. So if I can find it, I will send that out to you all as well. But I would say that would be the best kind of place to start. Another idea in terms of just like resources, people to talk to, would be, there's a national disaster crisis line, which if you Google that, you will find it. And so they have folks who are trained and can just provide like chat support, just to kind of help people, you know, maybe talk through something or just feel a little bit more secure if what you need is just someone to talk to for a little bit, if you're going through something that's related to a disaster. So obviously their training focuses on kind of national disasters related things like natural disasters like hurricanes, but I know that they've been doing cross training with those supporters around COVID, and then also around this issue of, unfortunately not everybody is safe at home. So okay, sleep, yes. So sleep is super important, and thank you for bringing this up, because this is especially, really, really important for folks. We know that postpartum people tend to not get a lot of sleep, but then generally. And right now, people are really struggling with sleep a lot as well. We're just seeing kind of an increase generally, and I think that's because of just kind of overall anxiety. So a couple of things. One thing that would be important to do would be to try to, during the day, to expose yourself to as much natural light as you can. So that actually helps to cue our brain that it is time to be awake. Short of, if you don't have a lot of windows, can't get a lot of natural light, making sure like when you get out to try to turn lights on, to try to have brighter light, and actually using light a little bit to kind of regulate yourself. So that's one thing I would make sure that you're doing, especially right away in the morning. Additionally, thinking about the idea of those rituals, and having a good bedtime ritual and a good morning ritual, so that you're kind of doing things and kind of helping your body learn when it's time for bed, when it's time for the morning. Part of that bedtime ritual is ideally like no screens, which is really hard, but as much as we can limit that, if you have, I'm sure you can do this on Android, but if you have an Apple or an iPhone, making sure you have like the nighttime settings or the night mode on, so it kind of dims the blue light for you in the evening, and it will actually dim your screen. That kind of stuff helps a little bit, but do try to minimize screens, and try to minimize things that are really like engaging towards the end of the night, so that your brain kind of starts to slow down a little bit. This includes news. If you are someone who's reading a lot of news, first of all, if you can limit it, that is a good thing. I am a total news junkie. My undergraduate was journalism, so I love the news. I get it, but really trying to reduce it, or not listening to it so much in the evening, would be one thing that you could also do to kind of begin to shut your brain down, and then finding things that calm you down. I think that would be useful. There's also a lot of other like sleep hygiene techniques. The other thing I could do, I mean, really, we could talk about sleep for a really long time. But what I do is I have actually another handout, Allison, I'll send you, that is on some sleep tips specifically for kind of what's going on with folks right now. It's from one of the sleep programs I work with, that they've developed it based on some of the feedback they're getting from their kind of sleep clients. But that would be my first couple things, like creating those rituals of going to bed, waking up, making sure you're doing lots of natural light during the day, dimming lights at night, minimizing screen time and news at night. And then the best that you can, waking up at the same time. But in the middle of the night, or when you go to bed, if you're not falling asleep, don't stay in your bed. This is one of the things that we do a lot at night, which is we kind of fight with ourselves to go back to sleep or to fall asleep. And we end up kind of in these cycles of like, okay, if I fall asleep now, I'll get 7 hours sleep. If I fall asleep now, I'll get 4 hours sleep. If I fall asleep now, and we just kind of spiral and you're just laying in bed. And what you want to do actually is if you've been laying in bed for longer than 15, 20 minutes, get up, keep the lights dim, go fold clothes, go put dishes away, go do something that's not engaging. Maybe read like not a fun book. And, I don't know if anyone of you has a partner or someone like my husband, I have old engineering textbooks. Those are good sometimes when I'm tired because math doesn't make sense to me. So it just really taxes me quickly. But find something that you can do and kind of get up. And then once you're feeling sleepy, then go back to bed. What you don't want to do is be lying awake in bed. It kind of can kind of disrupt you. Like you want your body to know bed is what you, like when you go to bed, it's time to sleep. And if you're doing a lot of worrying and stuff there, that disrupts that pairing. So just making sure you're doing that. And then as much as you can, if you are napping, not napping. So napping for adults, especially if you notice you're having any sleep problems, can kind of, it diminishes your need for sleep and your sleep drive. And so then at night, when you're trying to go back to sleep, your drive for sleep isn't as strong as it would have been if you hadn't napped. So then that can make it hard for you. But so those are a few tools. Like I said, I have a handout that I'll make sure we send out to folks as well that kind of lists some of those same things and hopefully helps you do some of them. What I will say is don't try to do all of that at once. Like that's a lot of different tips. Kind of maybe pick the thing that you feel like resonates with you, that you think might help you the most, and then try to implement that and then kind of build. If you try to take on too many things at once, it just feels overwhelming and it can be really frustrating. So yeah, awesome. Great question. Anything else? Give folks a second. Okay.
How do we reach out to find a therapist with Stanford? Does Blossom have anything like this for new moms?
So I'll let you speak for Blossom. So yes, so one of my affiliations is with Stanford. And so if you, I know we unfortunately we usually always have a long wait list, but you can reach out to Stanford. The best place to call is their intake, which is 650-498-9111. And that's 650-498-9111. And then they can check your insurance and all of that kind of stuff. So I know I do know Blossom also has some provider lists available. So of other folks who have an interest and have experience working with new moms and all of that. So that might be another resource as well. And maybe Allison, you can speak to that.
Yeah, so Blossom has a provider list, and you can filter it to therapists or even postpartum support. A lot of postpartum doulas right now are available to just call and talk to. Lots of them are just looking to support families. So you can even just call postpartum doulas, and Blossom's provider list has that. We also have our it's called Parent Baby Group, but you don't need to bring your baby. And we have a pregnancy support group. So that group is led by Eva, she's a therapist. So that's a great way to connect within a group setting. And we have those are online now. And so you can check that out on our website too.
Yeah, and I will say, like, especially depending on what's going on, for you, general support doulas are amazing. I love doulas. They can do such great work and can sometimes just that level of support and caring can be really, really useful. So that's another, helpful resource for folks. Yeah. All right, awesome. Any other final questions?
Thank you all for your questions. And yeah, like I mentioned, if anybody wants more information about Blossom, about our programs, how we support families, I put the link to Blossom in the chat right there. And like Elsa mentioned, we are a nonprofit, so we rely on donations to provide services like this and basically to provide all of our services. And yeah, we're committed to being there for our clients. So we're offering virtual classes and all of that now. So I put the link to our Network for Good for our donation site. If you feel inclined to donate, any amount helps. But thank you all so much. I hope you enjoyed this webinar, and thank you so much, Elsa. That was incredible. I feel like when you were talking, I was just like nodding my head like, yep, yep.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. I hope it was helpful for everybody. And if anyone has any other questions, in the PDF that you're getting is also my direct email. So I'm happy to answer any extra questions that folks may have. So thank you guys all. And thank you, Allison. Thanks, Blossom. I really appreciate this.
Of course, we're happy to have you. And yeah, we'll be following up with an email with all of that great information.
Awesome.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to be ending the meeting and logging off. So hope everybody has a great rest of your day and a great weekend.
Awesome. Bye, Allison. I'll send you that email with that other thing here in just a minute.
Sounds great.
Bye.
Thank you.